This is the Undefeated Sports Network. Sport Court, and Court is in session.
All right, what's up, everybody? Another episode of Sport Court. It's Wednesday night. Turtle, thanks for jumping on with me again, man. How you doing tonight?
Good, bro. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was a busy day for me. I had to work today. A couple things kind of came up, but I know you had to deal with some stuff. But we are here, and we are ready to talk about all of the Chicago Bears news that broke yesterday. I woke up at 4 a.m. to get ready for work, and the first thing that I seen was on Twitter, somebody had a video of George McCaskey and Ryan Poles walking through O'Hare, just chilling.
George in his Bears Letterman jacket like he's a senior in high school.
Yeah.
Big man on campus.
The best part is that he couldn't just fly him like right to Hallis Hall. You know what I mean? Like a private jet. He went right through O'Hare.
You know what? I'm not even worried about the private jet. Like, what? He couldn't send a car?
Yeah. He had to be there personally. Like, I get the personal touch, but like, I don't know. It seemed...
You know what? Maybe they were discussing business in the car. Maybe that's why he went and picked him up. But I mean, you can just call him an Uber. You know, they got the Uber XXL. You get a nice SUV, get him a little ride.
George doesn't have anybody that could drive to go get him. You know what I mean? But
I mean, Ted wasn't free.
Ted is always free.
I mean, nobody could just drive the car over and pick him up. Like, and not only that, but he went all the way inside to pick him up.
Yeah, walked in. I think he even had that little sign that you hold, like when you're not sure.
I didn't even know you could do that anymore. I thought like that was FDA or TSA regulated or something. I didn't think you could go all the way to baggage claim to get somebody anymore. I guess if you're George McCaskey, it's the city of Chicago. I guess they turn a blind eye to it. But I guess so. That's what I noticed when they showed it. I was like, damn, he went all the way in.
Yeah, he went all the way in with his jacket.
Like, what is that conversation though when you pick him up and you're walking out to the car? Like,
yeah, like, hey,
is George like look at him in like, hey, thanks for stopping by. How was the flight? Was it good?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
did they have a good movie? But so they George picks up Ryan at O'Hare. And
can I just say that I hate that his initials are Ryan P?
Yeah, I was gonna just say that. And
look, when we get to
the coaching search, I'm gonna talk about that as well. But like the fact that
before you go, I don't mean to cut you off. Did you hear Yurko today?
No.
When he was talking about that, he goes, you know what they should do? He goes, they should hire Matt Patricia as the head coach. And I'm like, what the hell would they do that? And he goes, because then George wouldn't have to remember anything. He goes, we defer to Ryan and Matt.
Yeah. Well, like I thought of it as like when you're in a relationship for a while and you break up with somebody, but then you go to somebody else with the same name, just so you don't accidentally say somebody else's name right during important moments.
It's so weird. Like they got the same name. Like he went and got a Ryan P. He went to the Chiefs. Like
it'll be easy for him to change the name on the door for the office.
They just leave Ryan P.
Ryan P. Yeah. But so they ended up hiring Ryan Poles, which I believe he was if I'm not mistaken,
he was the executive director of player personnel.
Yeah, player personnel.
Chiefs.
And Kansas City's now is a fairly successful organization. It helps having Patrick Mahomes.
Four straight AFC Championship games.
Right. Again, it does help having Patrick Mahomes.
Can you imagine? He started 4 seasons, and all 4 seasons he was in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
2 of the 3 he went to the
Remember the last Ryan
probably
P?
Going to go again.
Remember the last Ryan P? He drafted Mitch instead of
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. So let's hope that this Ryan P is a little bit better. But
at least we know from records and Matt Nagy's scouting that the Kansas City scouting department was in love with Patrick Mahomes.
Right. That's
They
absolutely
felt
true.
he was the best quarterback in the draft by far, which he is. So I mean, at least we have that to fall back on. That at least this guy, it wasn't like, oh, we should get Mitch.
Yeah, no, he just didn't want to develop Mitch. But that's the past. Now we're looking to the future, man. And tonight on the show we got Greg Braggs, big fan, favorite of the show. Always jumps on with us. He's real good. And then Erik Lambert from Sports Mockery is going to jump on around 7:15.
Man, that dude is on fire right now. He's got so many good articles. Did you see the one he posted a little while ago about? And I didn't even have a chance to read the article. I'd love to find out what it's about. But all I know is it says something about Poles is mad about Justin Fields.
What? Oh, I gotta look into
I didn't
that
have a chance to read it, so I don't know if he's mad that he has him. He's mad that he used him right. I don't know what it was, but
so that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. I want to. We talk a little bit about where this team is kind of going next, right? With Ryan Poles jumping in. I really like the fact that from all the reports that are coming out, how he basically told George that he wants the job, but he wants to pick who his head coach is. And I know there's thoughts like, well, they already did interviews with these guys. How do we know if they're his guys? I feel like the Bears were talking to a few people, right? A few GM candidates, and they were like, hey, these are some of the guys that we were thinking about interviewing for head coaching, or vice versa. Like, hey, who are some guys that you think would be a good head coach, for you? And I feel like Ryan maybe gave them a couple names, and those are the guys that they started the interviews with.
So the report that I saw earlier today, and I don't remember who it was, there's been so many articles coming out and so many pieces written over the last 24 hours that I just can't keep up with all of them. But somebody had referred to a report that had come out that the final three was actually Ryan Poles' final three. And that's why it's such a fast turnaround to the interviews, is because in the last few days, they identified him as probably their next GM.
Right.
And they asked him, like, who would be your three guys?
And it makes sense, right?
Right. I mean, like, you would want to be prepared when you come in, especially as guys are getting, offered deals and more interviews. And they said that he said, these are my three. However, I would like to reserve the right to change my final three and interview somebody else if I don't like what I see in these interviews.
Right.
But now then by all reports and accounts have come out that Dan Quinn has absolutely just impressed every step of the way. And that it really is going to come down to Dan Quinn. Is he going to come here? Or is he going to go to Denver? Is what I heard.
Doesn't he fly out to Denver today or tomorrow?
I think he flies out tonight, but I think he's meeting with them tomorrow. But the thing we got going for us is, Justin Fields, better defense. I mean, you're Denver, you're going to a situation where you've got Drew Lock.
Or maybe
you get Justin
Aaron
Fields.
Rodgers.
Or if you believe the reports that come out, you're looking at a team that has Aaron Rodgers at quarterback and Devontae Adams being added to a very, very skilled wide receiver room already. I'd tell you what, I know that's later in the show, and I don't want to jump all over your itinerary we got going here, but let me just say that if Aaron Rodgers somehow, if Denver's able to trade for Aaron Rodgers and then they go and they sign Devontae Adams to a deal, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he's going to have a run for his money. He might have another AFC Championship appearance, but I don't know. I'd have to.
Well, that's the thing. Denver. Like, does Rodgers want to go to a division where there's a guy like Patrick Mahomes there that could potentially?
I mean, again, from the hard part right now is because you never know what reports are real and what is just fabricated, because everybody is clicking on everything right now.
Right.
But the reports that came out yesterday say that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams both would prefer to go to Denver. That's where they want to be. Now, why that is, I'm not really sure. I mean, you're going to have an offense that has Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant. I mean, so you got a lot of weapons there. They got They got the run game with is that Javonte Williams that they drafted last year, and then you got Melvin Gordon. So I mean, you got a lot of pieces there in that offense. I guess they figure whatever's going to be, what's going to be with the defense. They got a good secondary there, but they traded away Von Miller and some of their other pieces, but they still got a pretty decent defense. I think the big thing for Denver is who's going to be the head coach, right?
Right. Because that kind of ties into that decision for, Aaron Rodgers as well.
Like, what if Denver goes out and hires Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach? Well, doesn't that make it even more likely that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams go there?
Yeah, you would think so, right? And but what about Sean Payton? He just retired too. So
Sean Payton cannot coach for another team this year unless he's traded.
Traded, right? But if he just retires, he has
and
to
from
stay
what
retired,
is right. Well, it's weird. From what it sounds like, if he stays retired, he has to stay retired for this season, and then he could come back. Like I guess by retiring this season, it basically voids his contract after this season, and then he would come back as a free agent, could coach anywhere.
Right.
Not like a player who retires and then they still own your rights. So I don't know how that exactly works, but it was the way they were saying it, and what it sounded like was if he sits out this year, he would be eligible to go anywhere he wanted.
Right. I'm not sure because you've seen players do that, right? Like
Calvin
Gronk,
Johnson.
right?
That was the whole reason Calvin Johnson didn't come out of retirement is because he wasn't going to go back to Detroit. Same thing with Barry Sanders.
Right, and then Gronk got traded, and he was like, "Nah, I'm going to retire." There's that the famous clip of him on Fox before one of the games where he's like giggling at the fact that he was like, "Oh, I'm not going there, so I retire." And so I'm not sure how the whole retirement thing works for coaches, and that if they can retire and then come back. But it's going to be interesting. I think that Sean Payton will probably sit out a year, see what happens in Denver. I mean, not Denver. I'm sorry, Dallas, and then.
I think that's the natural, right? Like he's been rumored to be interested to Dallas or mutual interest with Dallas for, 5 years now.
Yep.
But I think everyone's like, well, why is he leaving? If he doesn't have the interest in coaching, why would he after this year? Well, I mean, the Saints are the only team that are worse than Green Bay in cap space right now.
Yeah, Sean Payton left that team high and dry. No cap space, no draft.
$75 million over cap.
Yeah, he said, "I'm out of here." And then they got Jameis Winston to look forward to. So it's going to be, nuts.
I'm afraid of shit. I got Alvin Kamara in fantasy. I'm afraid of that might be. I might have to trade him.
Yeah, I mean. Fantasy. I don't even want to get into fantasy. It was terrible this year. We got our guy Braggs. He's all set to join in. Before he jumps on, I got a quick video.
I'm undefeated. I came to fight for the love of the game. Unstoppable. That's why I'm undefeated. Off the leash, out of the cage, an animal. That's why I'm undefeated. I know I can beat it. Won't give up, 'cause I believe it. Fight for the love of the game. Unstoppable. That's right. I'm undefeated.
All right. Show favorite, Greg Braggs from Braggs in the Stands. How you doing, Braggs?
I'm doing good. I don't know if I'm the asshole on Twitter, but
that's all right. That's all right. We're all kind of assholes at times on Twitter, right? It's just kind of
right. Gotta have fun in the off season. So we got a long way to go until.
That's
training.
right. What other things are we supposed
to do? I was saying the other day,
for head coaches.
Right, we had our guy Alan on. I was saying the other day, I find myself purposely avoiding certain conversations because I know I'm just going to come across like an asshole. So I'm just like, you know what? I'll just sit this one out.
Yep. So, Braggs, I mean, I talked to you at the beginning of the season.
I'm sorry?
No, I said we spoke at the beginning of the season, and there was a little bit of optimism on what was going to happen, what to expect from Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. So, eventually we found out that they were gone. Now we bring in another Ryan P. And I want to know kind of what your thoughts are on the Bears bringing in Ryan Poles as their GM.
Yeah, the Bears, George always making sure he's making sure he's staying under the budget. So he hires another Ryan P so he doesn't have to change the nameplate off the door. I like it.
That's funny. That's what I just told Turtle too. I was like, it'll be easy to change the name on the door.
When I told them they just leave Ryan P, don't even put.
They just
Poles.
scratch off the ACE.
And now
just
write
it right in.
P.
Well.
And then if they hire Matt Eberflus, man, then they got Ryan and Matt. They are
exactly.
Set.
And then George can go to the podium and say,
Jesus.
Like it, I mean, as I said a couple days before we signed him, I have no idea who Ryan Poles is. All I know is it sounds like a mix of Ryan Pace and Nick Foles. That's about as the extent of my analysis as far as who Ryan Poles is. But, we did a little instant reaction show yesterday. I had my guy Jordan on, and he really broke it down in a lot of ways that made sense for the hire. I guess with his connections to Kansas City and some of the different work he's done there and his football background and his ties with Matt Ryan, being, playing on the offensive line with him, his understanding of the offensive line and some of the offensive line moves they've made here in the last few years in Kansas City. Yep. I mean, after they lost the Super Bowl last year, they basically overhauled their offensive line and brought in a guy like Creed Humphrey. So that's encouraging. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have to wait and see what he does on his own,
right?
While he's the boss here, as opposed to working under guys in Kansas City. I guess my biggest surprise, I guess it does surprise me that it is somewhat of a Ryan Pace-esque hire because he's a young guy,
right?
And isn't proven, and you would have thought George would have been uncomfortable going that route,
right? Especially with like where they are right now in terms of draft capital. I know they got a little bit of flexibility in terms of salary cap, but they only have a second, a third, 2 fifths, and a sixth round. Like that's going to be a little bit tough to fill some of the holes. You're losing guys like Akeem Hicks, Allen Robinson, DeAndre Houston Carson, James Daniels.
Right.
You're losing a bunch of guys that last season you would say were key players, right? And to fill those spots, I mean, where would you even start?
And I heard a quote from Ryan Poles that someone pulled out in one of his past interviews where he said one of the biggest things he learned from Brett Veach is understanding the team you have and making those moves accordingly. But he was talking about that under the idea of
did we lose him? Did we lose
so.
Drags?
Sorry, I guess I'm on Ethernet, but I guess it's a little jumpy right now. I apologize.
It's the weather, man. Nothing wants to work in this weather.
Let me see what I can do here. I apologize.
No, that's all right, man. That's all right.
Here. So, no, as I was saying, he had this interview with Brett, talking about Brett Veach and what he learned about making the moves that are necessary for the team. But that was under the guise with the Chiefs, who are in win now mode. And that's the only team he knows is the Chiefs. Does he know how to make the right moves with a team that's, in flux? You could argue needs to be completely remodeled. When Theo Epstein came to the Cubs, he came with a lot of cachet and was able to say, look, guys, this is going to be a long process, and I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up and build a successful franchise. And we were all like, hey, we're all in, Theo, because you know what you're doing. And Ryan Poles doesn't necessarily have that, cachet coming in. So if he comes in, and we haven't heard his press conference yet, if he says, I'm going to rip this up and build it from the ground up, I think some Bears fans would get nervous. I don't know if he's going to say that. And like Tom Waddle was pointing out on his show with Waddle and Sylvia earlier today, is there going to be a kind of a it's like a prideful thing, a competitiveness thing. I can turn this team into a winner right away. Right. You come in and you're like it's like fans. We think the Bears can be great next year. I mean, how many teams make a 1-year turnaround?
Right.
And so is he going to get a little overzealous and make moves to try to make this team win right now? Or will he have the patience to let this take a little longer and build it the right way?
Right.
You know, that's for him to decide. Maybe he could turn this into a winner in 1 year, but until we see how he does it, we don't know. And Ryan Pace, he comes from a winning franchise. So he wants to trade all his assets and get great players right away, thinking, hey, I can turn this into a winner. And you kind of start, it's like quicksand. You start, doing too much of that. And now you put yourself in kind of behind the 8 ball.
Right. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Poor drafts, have to fill the gaps with free agency.
Well, it worked the first year, and that's why he believed in it. I got Khalil Mack and traded the picks, didn't look back. We almost won the Super Bowl, if not for Cody Parkey, right?
Yeah.
Then he keeps to that recipe, and now all of a sudden, it kind of fails him. So it'll be interesting to see, what Ryan Poles' philosophy is initially coming in, because he's got time. He just got hired.
Right.
So he's not getting fired after a year. So hopefully if he has to rip it down from the ground up, that's what he does. But when you got Justin Fields there at quarterback, Bears fans aren't going to be very patient.
Right.
They're going to want the team to be good next year. So
I think in terms of Justin Fields, right, like he's going to obviously have to see the development the first year, and that's going to ultimately come down to that head coach, right? And one of the things, like I was telling Turtle about, was I was impressed that he went to George and was like, hey, listen, I'll come to this team, but I want to pick my guy. Now, there's been a lot of talk about, well, if he's picking his guy, how come the Bears have these 3 are the finalists? What are your thoughts on that? Because we kind of think that maybe during the GM interview process, the Bears went to these guys and were like, hey, who are some guys you would look at as potential head coaches? And then they went and interviewed a few of those guys.
Right. No, it makes sense on the surface, especially if they were like, well, Ryan Poles is our guy. So Ryan, potentially if we were to hire you, wink, wink, we know we're hiring you. Who do you want as your head coaches? And he says those 3 names, Caldwell, Quinn, and Eberflus. So, okay, we're going to get through second interviews with them just to get the groundwork laid before we officially put pen to ink, with Poles. But at the same time, it's like, you didn't know for sure you were getting Poles. Anything can happen in this business. And now he comes in as the GM, and he only personally interviews these 3. So I can see it's a fair question to ask. Totally understandable that they already had laid the railroad tracks to have the 3 guys maybe that he listed in his interviews. But at the same time, if you're doing your due diligence as the GM of this organization now, you should be trying to make sure you unturn every stone yourself. Right. Who was doing the interviews before Poles was in Hallis Hall? It's guys that don't know what the hell they're talking about. So you can feel great about it, you can feel great about a guy, but without having done the interview. But the interview is the nuts and bolts of understanding exactly everything they're going to do to make your franchise better. So, if tonight they announce it, I'll be fine with it. As I said from the beginning, I'm going to root for whoever they pick, and we're going to all put on our Bears foam fingers, and we're going to root until they give us a reason not to.
Right. Sometimes I feel like
I'm sorry with my internet.
It's all right.
At the same time, my fucking internet. But at the same time, I can understand people that are nervous, if they make this decision right away. And you got to move quick because other teams are trying to get these guys too. But I can understand people being nervous that this whole thing is kind of being rushed. They hire them and, okay, here's your 3 guys, pick one. You know what I mean?
I mean, my thought process is it really can't get much worse than it was the last couple of years, right? In terms of offensive productivity. I mean, they were bottom 5 and going absolutely nowhere, and the defense is aging. There's still some pieces on the offense. I think, you hire a guy like Dan Quinn was somebody that I actually don't mind. I like what he did in Atlanta. He was fairly successful other than the Super Bowl incident. But I think if you would ask him, hey, would you do anything different in the Super Bowl? He would absolutely say, yeah, we'd run the ball more, right?
Absolutely.
But you got to learn through that kind of a loss to, realize that stuff. I think I wanted somebody like Dan Quinn or Doug Peterson, just because of the success that they had, how Doug was able to work with Carson Wentz, and Nick Foles got the best out of both of those guys. I think a young GM, experienced head coach is the way I would go. Eberflus, I don't know anything about him. I don't really watch a lot of Colts games. I've watched a few. Or like Jim Caldwell, I really liked also. So like you said, if they were to pick any of those guys, I wouldn't be mad. There's some other ones I would want more than, a few, but optimism is what we got to go with here, because we've been living.
We really have no choice,
right?
We have no choice. So they hire him, and you want to be the fan that bitches the whole way through, go for it. It very may be that it doesn't work out, but
right.
I'm not
bitch
at the beginning, like that right out the gate. It wasn't like that with Nagy right out the gate. Everybody was behind the Nagy hire, and then he did great in his first year, won Coach of the Year. We all loved him.
Yep.
And then
advisor guy.
Right. It all fell off the tracks. And that's when you turn on a coach, is when it's right. Like, you're going to be shitty about it right out the gate. Now, it is a little frustrating for me as a fan, because like the Theo Epstein thing, as I brought up before with Cubs, it fell right into their laps at the perfect time. They get Theo, falls right into their laps at the perfect time, leaving Boston when we needed a guy like that. And then, oh, by the way, Joe Madden leaves, and he falls into our lap at the perfect time. And there's Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton somewhat available, and those were my first two picks, and people called them pipe dreams, but those were my first two picks. Now, you want to have a coach that most people would throw a ticker tape parade for, those were the names. And what's frustrating to me is they're kind of available, but not an option. And it's like, son of a bitch. So now we have to, kind of take the next tier down.
Right.
And it's like, all right, so now we have to go safe. So that's why it kind of feels like a John Fox type of hire. Right. But to say that it's going to work out the same way as John Fox, this team has more to work with than what John did when he came in there. Even though I was negative on John Fox coming in, I wasn't booing him. I was more apathetic at that point as a Bears fan, because the Bears were so terrible.
That roster was horrible.
Yeah, at least now we have Justin Fields, and that's a great starting block for any coach and GM to work their way out of. So, it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. But, I'm positive right now. There's no reason not to be. We got the change we wanted. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are no longer here. And so now we have to hope that the guys coming in do a better job.
Absolutely.
So Brad, does it worry you that they say that the rumor coming out today was that Dan Quinn's offensive coordinator is going to be Mike Kafka? Does it worry you that it's another offensive coordinator? Well, I guess he wasn't the offensive coordinator there. It was a quarterback's coach from Kansas City. Does it worry you we're going down the same path? We took Matt Nagy, who really barely called plays in Kansas City, and when he did, all that happened in the Super Bowl was he stopped running the ball and they lost the Super Bowl. Does it worry you that we're going to the same offense and not even a play caller, a guy that's only been a quarterback coach, would be who we're going to trust to develop Matt Nagy, when Dan Quinn is not an offensive guy and is not a guy that's going to look over the offense? He's going to really be involved in the defense and let a young, not even proven coordinator, not even a play caller, trust him to develop Justin Fields and this offense into what it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely fair to worry about it. I think the thing with Matt Nagy was he could have been a much better coach than he was. The reason he was in over his head is because he couldn't adjust. Now, to say that anybody else that comes from the Reid coaching tree or the Kansas City Chiefs offense is going to have that same problem is kind of projecting. Maybe this guy is better at adjusting.
Do you think that's why Eric Bieniemy hasn't gotten any real consideration? Is because of how poorly Matt Nagy did in Chicago?
It very well could be. I mean, that's why it's a surprise to me that he hasn't been a candidate with Brian Poles.
Right.
He was right there in house. So that kind of speaks volumes to all that. So, to say that oh, he's going to be just like Matt Nagy is a little bit of projecting, and it's no guarantee. He could be much better than Matt Nagy, and he's not the head coach, so
Right.
Matt's other biggest problem was he had way too much on his plate, and he was in over his head. Now Mike Kafka, he could hone in. I believe he went to Northwestern too, so he's a hometown kid. He knows
Nice.
he knows the Chicago ways.
Yep.
Matt might not have understood what he's signing up for coming to Chicago. And that first year was like a honeymoon.
Yeah,
the honeymoon
absolutely was.
The honeymoon ended real quick here. He learned that the last few years.
That plane landed on the way back home, and it was over. They got divorced.
Another
fast.
name that has been kind of put out there is Mike McDaniel, or Mike Daniels from the 49ers, their offensive coordinator. And I think if they were able to pull him from the Niners, and get him out of Kyle Shanahan's tree where he's coming in and now it's his baby, the offense is completely his baby, I would love that hire because I just kind of like this guy's swag and intelligence. I've seen a couple of his clips and just watching San Francisco's offense over the last year. How could you not want a piece of that?
Right.
And wasn't he in Atlanta with Dan Quinn?
Exactly right. There's a connection there. So, maybe he's somebody that could become an option here. And that's why if that's who his offense coordinator is, then Dan Quinn encourages, I'm encouraged by that greatly. So it's impossible to say, but that ultimately, if Dan Quinn gets the job, it's mostly going to be because of him showing the kind of staff he can build. I read some things that people said could have been the DeBears blog, Jeff Hughes has done a fantastic job of covering all the offseason reporting here, coming in and out of Hallis Hall, all the little whispers. He seems to be getting a hold of them all. And I heard him say that they said Byron Leftwich, seemed like a good leader, but couldn't prove necessarily that he could put a great staff together. And I think Dan Quinn has already proven that as a head coach once, and might have proven that in what he said in his interview. Who knows? I mean, it just happened a few hours ago. So those are certainly things you have to consider, and I think some fans kind of don't value that as much. They just want the hot name.
Right.
But if somebody can bring in a big time staff, and then other people are like, well, look at Dan Quinn. Look at all these coaches he had around him at Atlanta. That's why he was so good. Well, he brought those coaches in.
Right.
So
he was able to identify the talent
for
in that. Right.
Making great hires, I mean, so if that's what he's able to do here, then then he's our guy. But, at the end of the day, I think that they just want to make sure they're, being safe with this. I think that's what it will feel like.
Right.
If they are to go with Jim Caldwell or Dan Quinn.
And
as opposed to someone else.
I know you said that there's a lot of people out there that want like that flashy name, right? But I forget which show it was. It might have been Cap and Jay Hood were talking about, some people look for their head coach right in that moment, but like you want to look for a head coach that's going to be there in 10 years, right? So like if we get Dan Quinn, he's a guy that we've seen proven, builds his staff, knows how to get the most out of his players, did really well in Atlanta. And you're right. It's a safe pick, but I think safe is good for this team right now.
Yeah.
After the debacle of Matt Nagy, you kind of need somebody to reel it back in from.
Well, that's kind of how you do it, right? You get the flashy name, then you get the old hat, the old elder statesman. We just keep going back and forth. At the end of the day, you just need to get it right.
Right.
I mean, Sean McVay was a young hot name. It worked out for them. You can do this a few different ways. At the end of the day, they just need to get it right. And it's also about what names are available. I mean, Sean Payton saying, hey, don't call me until a year from now. Well, that's just bad timing for us. Right. If that could have been a perfect situation here with Justin Fields and that kind of quarterback or offensive mind in Sean Payton. So, sometimes it's about timing too, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm not going to be pissy pants because Dan Quinn isn't this Ferrari type of move. At the end of the day, if they get it right, they get it right. The thing that concerns me about a defensive coach is, if they did bring in a Mike Daniels from, San Francisco, and we had this amazing offense next year that, changed the way people look at the Chicago Bears, and Justin Fields is this superstar quarterback. Well, he'll be the next head coach, in a year from now. So then we'll be starting back over with a different system. So that's always been my biggest concern with hiring a defensive coach first. But, again, beggars can't be choosers. We got Matt Nagy out of here. He's gone, and now we need a replacement.
That was the reason.
These are the names available.
That's the reason they went with Nagy, right? Is because they wanted that offensive-minded guy to come in,
right?
So they didn't have to worry about an OC leaving, and it just completely didn't work.
Right. Mark Trestman, same thing. So,
that was a debacle.
Doesn't always work. Some teams it does. Of course, with the Bears, it never does. But, who knows how it's going to play out this time. But I'm glad we got Justin Fields on our side. That's a good start. Yeah,
you got a quarterback that you can look forward to the future with. Braggs, what kind of stuff you been up to lately?
Talking shit on Twitter. I'm not working right now. The last couple of weeks we've been off with the snow and the cold.
Right.
I'm going to a lot of Purdue basketball games. I follow Purdue and of course the Bulls. I haven't been to a Bulls game in about a month, but it's basketball season a lot for Braggs in the stands, so to speak. But when it comes to the Bears coverage, I'm just on Twitter, just pissing people off. Like, George
McCaskey, we know.
George McCaskey picks up Ryan Poles from the airport, and some guy gets a video of him in the airport, and Ryan's dressed up like every grandpa I see walking into the stadium.
I'm pretty sure my dad has the same jacket.
I mean the shoes and the shoelaces and the mask and he looks so goofy, and I couldn't help myself. I just think before I tweet, which is probably a problem. But I'm sitting there like, couldn't the guy dress a little like? He just looks like such a dork. Like, you can't tell me that Ryan Poles, when he got off the flight, here comes George. He's like, look at this dork. Like, it don't mean he didn't want to sign with the Bears. I'm just sitting there like, God dang. Like, if I was I'm just thinking to myself of like, because that's how I dress. And that's what I said when I made fun of it. I go, I get this is exactly how I dress when my drunk ass is walking through South Lot. But, this is the owner of a $3 billion organization. Like, it's just, and that's who George is. He's the self-admitted fan. He said that during his presser that everybody ripped him to shreds about, but that's kind of my issue with the whole thing. Like, it's not serious, but at the same time, when you're viewed as this failed mom and pop organization, and then you have the owner of the Bears walking up dressed like that, it's just like, it's hard to ever take us seriously. And I get it. Like, none of it matters if he gets the hire right, obviously. But, that goes without saying. If the Bears were a winning franchise for the last 11 years that George was our owner, and he was walking around the airports and South Lot and training camp dressed like that, we'd all be like, look at George. We love this fucking guy. He's one of us. But we've sucked every year. He's been our owner. So it's hard for me to be like, Jiminy Jillikers, look at this guy. He's just like my dad. Like, I'm like, man, can't we just get somebody that's like not as comfortable? But, at the end of the day, this is who we have as our owner. And I hate saying it, because I want everything to work out. There's nothing I want more than the Bears to win a Super Bowl. I got my Cubs World Series. I watched I had the honor of watching Michael Jordan. That's why I'm a sports fan like I am today. 6 championships, spoiled by the greatest player to ever play any sports. But I've never seen the Bears win a Super Bowl. I was 2 months old when the Bears won the Super Bowl, so that doesn't count. Right. So, as nice as the 85 Bears are, as nice as Jim McMahon is behind my shoulder, like that doesn't resonate with me. Devin Hester returning a kick in a Super Bowl loss that we, game that we lost, like that's my greatest memory. Right.
Yeah,
so
100%.
There's nothing I want more than to be in the stands when the Bears win the Super Bowl, and I'm willing to shell out $5,000 when they do it. I'll be there for it, but they got to get there. And, I worry that it'll ever get done with this ownership. And that's sometimes I think where the why I always got my eyes hard on George, especially lately. And I know he's trying to win one for his mom because she's getting to 100 years old and win one before she goes. And I can respect that. I'd want to do the same thing. I'm a mama's boy, so I'd want to do it for my mom too. But, I think sometimes his decision-making is, always hindered by that. And he's a very sentimental owner. You've heard this with Matt Nagy. You heard it with Mark Trestman. He's always got like this love story of why he picked the guys he picked for GM and head coaches. He did this with Matt Nagy, and it's like, I already can hear the love stories of why he picked Ryan Poles, and all that's great. At the end of the day, Ryan Poles just needs to be fucking great at his job. And hell, I hope to God he is. I feel calm. Everybody's giving him rave reviews, but we heard all the rave reviews about Matt Nagy too.
Absolutely.
And these are all from people that are his friends, like
Reed.
Who was the fantasy football guy from
Field
ESPN
Yates.
that just to work
Field
for
Yates.
Field Yates. He's like, this guy is great. I love this guy. I went to his
We've
wedding.
been
I'm like,
friends for 10 years.
Yeah, you're his friend. You went to his wedding. What are you gonna say? That he's a fucking idiot? Like, and then all the Chiefs guys are all like, well, we love him. Well, yeah, you guys got 2 third-round picks for that hire.
Right.
So what are you gonna be like, dumbasses?
Right.
Like, I mean, at the same time, I want to be positive about it. I'm not gonna be negative about it. And then, of course, I had to just, I'm getting torn apart for that take. And then they show the picture of him signing the contract, and he's got a freaking pen that looks like the ones I, had like 30 of in my backpack in high school that all ran out of ink. And I'm like, this, I just got done watching Entourage over again. Like Ari Gold would not have allowed someone to sign a contract of that magnitude with a pen like that. Like, come on, people, what are we doing here?
It looked like one of those pens where you just turn to like, oh man, has anybody got a pen?
It's like that big pen.
Junk drawer.
It's like that big pen right there.
Yeah. I'm like, the goddamn.
It doesn't click. It doesn't turn. It's just
I'm
one
like
of
thinking
those.
of the liar scene when he's like, the goddamn pen is blue, and it's like, none of this shit matters.
Nope.
But, I do find it funny. People are like, I don't care what kind of pen he has. I just want to win. Well, we've never fucking won. So
right. So the pen is what we have to focus on right now because the winning hasn't been there. So
excuse me, I'm choking.
They haven't had the wins. They haven't had the.
It is funny.
I had people ripping me because I put on today when they put the video out of him backing his car in and then getting out of his car and walking in and say, "All right, Bears fans, let's go to work." I was like, why does it look like there's nobody in the building? Does he even have keys yet? And they were like, oh, we're just glad that he's here that early. And I was like, relax. It's just a joke. Like,
right. And that's the other thing. I'm just joking around. And
Bears Twitter has been on edge for a
my
minute,
God.
man.
People are losing their minds with my jokes about all this shit. And it's like, but then, of course, you see that video. And then the Giants release their video of their GM coming in looking like a chemistry teacher. Right. And all the same people that were attacking me for all my shitty ass jokes are now got jokes for how he looks walking in. I'm like, oh, now we can talk about how this dude's dressed. I can't talk about how people dress, but now we can talk about this.
That poor camera dude had to sit out there, wait for this dude to reverse into a spot.
Cold,
bro. No, thank you.
Then he gets he's got orange shoes and he's got his big Bears coat. And I was like, you think they got their size ahead of time, or you think they just like have all that stuff sitting there? It's like, so you're the new GM. Have your pick of what's here. Ryan left that jacket over there. Oh, Matt left something in his office. You're more than welcome to that.
It's the off season when this is where our focus is at. But this is all we got. And, you got to have fun with it. And Bears fans have been through a lot. So sometimes you just got to laugh a little bit.
Right. The fact that we're laughing and have some kind of optimism instead of just
there was a fan on Twitter. He was talking about he was saying something about the 3 finalists and about how he thinks it's forced. And I said, well, no. I said, clearly they known they were hiring him for a long time. You see, he's got Bears logoed shoes. I said he must have ordered those a while ago to get them in, and they were just tearing me up. I was like, relax, it's just a joke.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I had one guy come at me who I don't know, he hates me, whatever. My wife can barely stand me, so I don't care if some Antonio doesn't like me. But he was like, this guy is the reason why Bears fans look so stupid and sound so stupid. I was like, God damn it. I didn't think I had that big of a pulse on the Bears fandom. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm making everybody look stupid around here. I'll try not to open my big mouth, but I'm sorry. I can't help myself. I got a big mouth,
Bears fans make themselves look stupid. Like, we all do it.
The Bears make us look stupid.
That's right. 100%. Yep. I had after George's press conference, I had a buddy of mine who's a Packer fan. After George's initial press conference, he texted me the moment it ended. He goes, "My God, I am sorry." And I was like, dude, that's where we are right now. That's what Packer fans don't even want to rip on us. They just feel bad for us.
That's what I mean. Like, and I even admitted that when I was going into him about what he was dressed as walking through O'Hare. I get that it is a bias. Like, I'm sick of George, and that, between last year's press conference talking about collaboration and the bigger issue, and I thought was overshadowed because of all the collaboration jokes, was that George, Ted Phillips, Matt Nagy, and Ryan Pace all had the audacity to stand up there and say, we've got everything's fine. The only thing we need to get right now is the quarterback. And I just thought that was so insulting to fans that are really following this. I thought that was a total throw under the bus of Mitch Trubisky. I know everybody thinks I'm the biggest Mitch Trubisky ball washer, but all I ever tried to say was it's not all on Mitch. That was the big line I said for years, and I stood by that through all the thick and thin. And when they go to the press conference and say, look, guys, everything's there. The culture is the envy of the league. And if we just the only thing we haven't gotten right is the quarterback. I just thought that was such a line of bullshit when you got Javon Wims fighting in the middle of the season with the Saints, and then 2 months later,
and then dropping the Hail Mary in the playoffs.
Dropping the interception in the playoffs when he should have already been cut. And then you got Anthony Miller fighting the exact same player on the exact same team in the playoffs, getting thrown out when you've already been through this in the regular season. That to me just totally embodied Matt Nagy's lack of respect in the locker room. And that's why he should have been gone. And Ryan Pace was the one that hired Matt Nagy. And now these two jamokes are standing up there in the collaboration press conference talking about how none of this is our fault. It was all Mitch's fault. And Mitch, you benched for Nick Foles. It got progressively worse. And then Mitch comes back, wins some games against teams that aren't as good. And now all of a sudden you guys get another year off your leash. Right. You should have been thanking Mitch for his service and then, moving on to the next year, gracefully. And I just thought that was just shitty. And then this year with George McCaskey standing up there, coming right out the gate, comparing Jeff Dickerson's son to Matt Nagy's kids getting hassled at a high school game. If you've ever been to a high school event, and I've been to plenty because I cover it for Region Sports Network, student sections are mean. This isn't nothing new to Matt Nagy's kids.
And I got a 15-year-old stepson that plays high school hockey. And it's not pretty. And
fire Nagy is like the 98th worst thing I think I've ever heard in a student section, chant. So, please, George, let's not clutch the pearls and certainly not try to compare, the plight of Matt Nagy's kids to what Jeff Dickerson's son is going through. I thought that was in such bad taste.
I did too.
And then, just everything else he's saying, the rest of that press conference, focusing on the Olin Kreutz stuff and, contradicting himself about the hierarchy.
Does the board have faith in him? Yes, the board has faith. The board's
His mom is the board. Exactly. My mom has a lot of faith in me too, whether I fuck up or not.
Right. So, and everybody else on the board besides his mom is somebody in the family.
So that's what I mean. After these press conferences the last couple of years, I'm like, man, fuck this guy. I've always, tried to be nice to him when he's walking through South Lot and things like that. Back before, I ever did coverage or anything, I'd be like, oh, that's George McCaskey. Let's take a picture. But now it's like, I'm at a point where I'm like, dude, just sell this team so we can actually get people that know what they're doing around here. And I know that's never going to happen until he decides it, and I hope it works out before that ever has to happen. But at the same time, it's hard to have that faith that it will. Every dog has its day, and it's a kind of a luck of the average. You got a luck of the averages and hope that it just comes your way one day. But I want us to win by more than luck one day. I want it to be because they were good enough. Yeah.
Where it's not like, 2006, cool, we were good, and then not. And then, we went to the NFC Championship with Jay, and then we're not good anymore. And I want it to be like, back-to-back NFC Championship games, awesome. We just haven't seen that in this city.
Right.
We take a back into the playoffs 2 years ago as a sign of improvement when it really wasn't, because you got destroyed in the playoffs. So
and now you got Ryan Poles in there, who's basically the top of the ladder when it comes to head of football operations, because Ted and George know nothing about football, and we're talking about a guy that's one of the youngest GMs in the league, and now it's his responsibility to turn one of the most inconsistent or failed franchises, a charter franchise in the NFL that needs a lot of work to get us to what we just saw with the Chiefs and the Bills, to get to that level of kind of football. Now it's all on the, laid at the feet of a very young GM who is promising. A lot of people speaking rave reviews, but at the end of the day, he's got to show what he can do. Luckily, he's got Justin Fields as a great head start. Most GMs have to come in and find a quarterback for their franchise, and he has that in his back pocket. So that's a good start, and I hope he can build around that. And I almost put it on Twitter, but I've been opening my big mouth a little too much, but I'll say it on this show. If Ryan Poles gets us a Super Bowl championship, I'll tattoo his name right on my fucking ass. I swear to God.
And we will be live during that, and we'll record the whole thing.
I don't know how many viewers you might get. You might get banned from YouTube for some content like that.
Maybe.
But
I know Twitch will probably let us do it. So.
I'll tell you what, I'm at that point because I'm desperate. There's nothing I want more in this world, but we got a long way to go if you watch what we saw last weekend in those 4 football games.
Right. Yeah, it's the Bears are far, far from that. Well, Braggs, thanks for jumping on with me, man. I know you've been good to this show. I appreciate it every time.
I appreciate you. Sorry I couldn't make it last week. Different high school stuff. I'm doing high school coverage, going to Purdue games, doing all this different stuff. So a little bit of a juggling act this time of year for me, especially.
No, I'd rather have you on this show when the Bears just hired the GM anyway.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
Right.
And hey,
way better timing.
Maybe before your show's over, they'll be announcing the head coaching hire. So
I keep checking.
Happy to come on. Happy to come on anytime with you guys. Just let me know and I'll come on.
You want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to my nonsense or read my nonsense on Twitter, my personal handle is at gbraggsjr23, and the show account, which is less tomfoolery and more just the show content, is at Braggs in Stands. So that's where I'm at. If you search Braggs in the Stands on YouTube or on Facebook, you can find my pages there where I post all my content, but I do most of my shit talking on Twitter on my personal page. So if you're up for the nonsense and the tomfoolery, feel free to follow.
Or if you just want to talk shit to Braggs, that's the place to go.
Yeah, if you want to throw, heat my way, I've been getting a lot of it. I can take it, but
you're used to it.
I always worry when bigger names, celebrity type people follow me, because I'm like, are you sure you want to read what the fuck I'm about to tweet? Like, please, I'll DM them. I'm like, just mute me now because you're gonna hate me in a month. So
just ignore anything you see while you're.
I need to get back to work. We got to get this snow out of here so I can get off Twitter. But
all right, Braggs, thanks for jumping on with us, man.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
Soon.
Thanks, brother.
Guys.
All right, man. Greg Braggs in Stands, and
he's always entertaining.
Oh, yeah. I mean, dude, Braggs has been back when I was with Fat Mike over on the other network. He was always good to me. Jumped on with me a few times then, and it's always good conversation, Bears talk with Braggs, and I look forward to getting him back on. Well, we can take a little bit of a break. I have Erik Lambert jumping on here in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes. We'll play 7.5. You're right. I'm looking at my clock. We'll take a break real quick and we'll be right back. All right. We are brought to you by Mr. CBD Chicago. Mr. CBD Chicago is a wholesome cannabis distribution company that possesses a fabulous club. Were you pointing at me?
No, I was pointing at the MrCBDChicago.com.
They have a fabulous club
at home.
Yeah, for $9.95 a month, one can acquire a plethora of CBD and hemp-derived products. Just go to www.mrcbdchicago.com. It's on my side right here.
I was trying to point over.
I was like, what are you?
I have to like turn my hand because it's actually over there, which is weird because I'm really pointing away from it.
Yep. Yeah, I get
So, you
backwards on here
know,
too sometimes.
yeah,
But
you know.
yeah, man, that was a good conversation. We got Erik Lambert jumping on. Anything specifically stand out to you about what we talked to Braggs about?
You know, I think it's just a lot of the same feeling that a lot of us have, right? Like we've been talking about it for weeks now. It's I don't really care who it is as long as they get it right. Like
Right.
I don't even not gonna be worried about, oh my God, it's not who I wanted. I don't know who the hell should be the next GM and head coach. I don't know who's the guy that's gonna get it right. Like,
Right. I don't get paid to make that decision.
do I really know the difference
You know?
between Morocco Brown and Ryan Poles?
Nope.
I know that one works for the Colts and one works for the Chiefs.
Right.
I mean,
And one works
like,
for
I can tell you that, but like,
right. One deals with this aspect, the other one deals with this one.
well, it's the same as with the coordinators. Like, we don't really know, you know, when quote unquote they call the plays. We don't know who really calls the plays. Like, shit, we don't even know when Matt Nagy said he was turning play calling over. We don't even know that Bill Lazor was really calling the plays. I mean,
Right.
all you can do is go off what you hear. So
I still have this thought that the whole time
let it go. Don't even do it. You're going down the wrong path.
just the whole time that they were like, hey, we're gonna, Lazor's gonna call the plays. I feel like they switched off every quarter. Like Lazor would start
Bill
the
Lazor would
game.
have quit if that's what it was.
Probably not.
Why wouldn't you? If I told the world Angelo's calling the plays for this shitty ass offense,
I
but
guess, and then
really
you look
I was
terrible.
calling the shitty ass plays for this offense, you wouldn't be like, bro.
I don't want my name associated with that. That's true. That's true. But it always seemed like there was a little bit of progression, and then something completely Nagy-esque would get called, and it would just.
And I mean, somebody around the NFL, like the people around the NFL, they know what's up. Like,
right.
There's a reason Mitch didn't get offered a starting job anywhere, not even a chance to compete, or even a high price backup. Right? Like he got a cheap ass backup job for the most safest job in all of football.
Right, and now people will forget the catastrophe in Chicago.
Right.
He'll go out. He'll be the next quarterback for. Let's throw a team out there. Who do you think?
He's going to be the next Chase Daniels. He's just going to work his way around the circuit as a backup for everybody.
You think so? I think the Steelers.
Oh,
I think the Steelers get him if they can't get anybody.
Here.
Unless they trade for Russell Wilson.
Bruh, that
door
Seattle is closed. Nobody thinks he can compete for a starting job. Pittsburgh didn't even think he was good enough to bring in and compete with Mason Rudolph for a backup job. They went out and got Dwayne Haskins instead.
No,
that tells you all you need to know right there. They thought Dwayne Haskins was a better idea than Mitch Trubisky. Yeah, but no, I mean, whether it's stuff like that, like the NFL knows what's up. Nobody offered him a job. Nobody said, hey, Bill Lazor, you should be our offensive coordinator. We're looking for an offensive coordinator. You see, they went after Sean Desai. Nobody was interested in Bill Lazor either. I'm tired of having all the guys that nobody's interested in because they all suck. Like, so like I said, I don't know the difference between Morocco Brown or Ryan Poles, but I just hope that this dude is the guy.
You almost said Ryan Pace.
I almost did. But
it's hard not to, though.
It is. Like I said, I don't care. I would have liked this to be an organization, not the Chiefs, because we just went down that road and everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Chiefs again. But at least you don't have to listen to everybody talk about, well, they only hired Morocco Brown because Bill Polian is loyal to the Colts.
And that's what would have happened.
Right. So you don't have to hear that. So
I want to ask Erik this question when he jumps on with us. I'm hoping, obviously it would take winning, but I'm hoping that Poles is that guy, right? That brings the new, winning culture to Chicago. And then he decides, hey, we're going to change this structure within this organization, and he'll be, the president of the football ops, and then he'll hire his GM and coach. And that way you kind of build a football side up from the ground. You know what I mean? And you have something that can continue.
Well, I mean, it sounded like they were going to go down that road. They interviewed Omar Khan, and supposedly that interview was not for a GM. It was for something much larger. So, I mean, like now that they've hired a GM, does that mean that job isn't going to happen? Are they not going to hire him?
Right, because why would you hire somebody
your GM before the president of operations? Like, I just don't understand. So that tells me that, okay, we're not going to do that.
Right.
And then I saw a report today that said they were close to hiring Jim Harbaugh last week.
Right.
Okay, well, what swayed you away from hiring Jim Harbaugh? And what was it that made Jim Harbaugh interested in your job? Because so far we hear that's not the case.
Right.
So it's just...
Our guy Erik is sitting in the green room. I'm gonna bring him on real quick. Erik Lambert, Sports Mockery. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining
Good,
me
man.
again, man. I appreciate every time you've jumped on and talked with us. Turtle and I were just talking about, and I wanted to bring this question up to you. First off, the Bears got a new GM. Everybody knows that. And the hope is obviously that this guy kind of leads us out of the dark ages as Bears fans, right?
Of course.
Do you see a scenario where, if that's the case, he could shake up the franchise in terms of like roles, where he would move himself up to, a president of football and then hire a GM and then kind of go from there?
Well, the way that the Bears have always viewed the GM is he basically is the
Right.
president of football operations. So you're just getting into semantics at that point, which title is which. It really
Right.
doesn't matter. It matters who has the power. And George McCaskey made it clear that the general manager is going to answer directly to him moving forward. And that's a good thing in my opinion. John Madden always said the most critical thing about his head coaching success in Oakland back in the 70s was there was nobody between him and Al Davis. He always had direct access to the owner, so he could go to him for whatever he needed. And it's going to be the same thing with Ryan Poles. And I think that's very important. Having that access to the owner and say, here, I need this, I need this, I need this. And I would believe that George McCaskey is going to grant most of those requests unless they're completely outlandish. So, in that context, I think he's right where he needs to be. He has all the power, and he's going to be able to make all the necessary decisions. It's going to come down to, is he going to shake up the scouting staff? Is he going to shake up the front office? Is he going to expand the analytics department, which is something that a lot of people think he will do because he's more of a hybrid between old school and new school.
Sure.
So these are all important things that he's going to address moving forward. He's not going to do it right away because he has other, more pressing tasks to get to. So, but I do believe that he is going to make some changes to fit what he has in terms of a vision for the Bears.
So you bring up a lot of things that he's got to, work on this next offseason with very limited resources.
Right.
He's got 5 draft picks and a little bit over $42 million in cap space. So, I mean, you do have a little bit cap flexibility. What do you think the realistic, biggest needs are for the Bears heading into next season?
Given his experience in Kansas City, I do believe he's probably going to focus the bulk of those resources on offense, especially up front. He's known for being an offensive line guy. He played offensive line, obviously, but he was actually really good at scouting them in Kansas City, and he was praised for it. So that's a very good thing for the Bears because Justin Fields badly needs protection. So that's a good thing. I think he's also going to focus on receivers because they're only going to have one notable one under contract in Darnell Mooney. So you're really going to have to address that. So I do believe he's going to have to prioritize this offseason because of the limited resources. So I do believe he's probably going to focus most of them on offense, try to get Justin Fields up and running. And then once you get into 2023, when you start to get more resources flowing in at that point, he'll probably shift over and see if he can do some things, adding some more young talent to the defensive side as well.
Absolutely. Now back to the defensive side. There's a lot of those guys, you're looking at guys like Akeem Hicks, DeAndre Houston Carson, that are going to be free agents. Those guys, they made an impact on that defense. Excuse me. Do you see a scenario where he could come in and be like, all right, this defense is about to fall off. Let's start trying to move away from some of these pieces?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, whenever you have a regime change, nobody is safe. There's only a select, very small few players who are probably safe. Justin Fields is an obvious one because it's reported that Poles likes him, and he's really your best option moving forward, considering the quarterback market you're probably going to run into this year. So he's safe. There might be one or two other guys who are cheap and young and have played well that he'll probably keep. But if you look at the older guys, if you can get decent packages for them in terms of picks and other resources, he's definitely going to consider it. I think Ryan Pace did the same thing when he came in 2015. He traded Brandon Marshall and he made some other moves. So when you look at the older veterans, the 30 and older guys, I wouldn't consider any of them safe at this point, regardless of how well they played this past season, including Robert Quinn, including Khalil Mack. Pick out all those guys. Some of them might be back, but it all depends on what Poles thinks he can get for them on the market moving into the offseason.
Right. And I'm not like a cap expert, so, I'm going to throw names out there like a Robert Quinn, right? Guys coming off of a hell of a season after a terrible season. I feel like if you were able to move on from him, he should be somebody that you could look to and say, hey, we're not ready to win right now. What can we get from a contending team that can help this team build right now?
Absolutely. And with Robert Quinn, he is tradable. It's a bit difficult because of his contract. You would get about $4 million in terms of cap space, but you would have to take on $12 million in dead space, which is always a bit of a problem for a lot of teams.
Right.
But, when you're trading a guy who just got 19 sacks in a season, there's probably going to be a market for him despite whatever age he might be. They'll feel they're getting a guy who's ready to contribute right now. And it would probably be a team that thinks they're ready to compete, for a deep playoff run. So guys like that always seem to have a decent market. It just comes down to, do the Bears feel that the return is worth it to sacrifice him? Or do they feel that it's probably best to keep him and see if you can get another great year out of him?
Right. Now, shifting back to the front office side of it, what are your expectations for this head coaching search? Because a lot of people are, confused because the Bears did some interviews before they hired Poles. Now Poles is there. He's doing the same interviews. Do you think it's a scenario where the Bears went to Poles, interviewed him for the GM position, and then we're like, hey, what are some potential head coaches that you would bring over here? And then they went and interviewed those guys? Or how do you think, that all went down?
I absolutely think that's how it went down. One of my own guys told me that was probably how it went. They did this with every candidate, not just Poles. They went to a GM and said, okay, what head coaches would you probably explore? And then they've got those names and like, okay, we should explore this guy, and this guy. We'll meet them, get our feel for them. If we like them, we'll tell them, okay, we like these guys. Feel free to talk to them and see if you like them too. And if we're both, in rhythm on this, then he'll be our guy. So I assume Quinn is probably the one that Poles recommended, because after they interviewed Poles, that was when they put in the request to interview Quinn. So
Right.
The timing lines up there. And it feels like right now Quinn is the favorite in terms of being the next Bears coach, but it's a problem because he's in demand elsewhere, in New York, in Denver. So
right.
it's kind of one of those, I don't want to call it a bidding war, but it's a question of what spot does Quinn want to go, and is anybody else sort of pushing him out on those other jobs, maybe Flores or Dable in New York, maybe Nathaniel Hackett in Denver. So it's still a very fluid situation. And I think if no decision is reached by the end of today or early tomorrow on the Bears head coach, I have to presume that Poles is probably going to expand the list a little bit to see if he can meet some other guys, because no head coach has been hired yet. We forget that. There's still 9 openings in the league. Nobody's been hired. So there's really no rush. You can still continue to meet guys and, get the lay of the land. And once you're confident on who you want, then make the hire.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like that, that idea. Nobody's hired a coach. The Bears are usually the first ones to, somebody's hired, now we got to jump on this. I do like that they've been a little bit more patient with this. I know as fans, it's kind of like, just make the decision already.
Right.
In your opinion, what is more important, the GM or the head coach in this process for the Bears?
It all depends on who has more power. It's every structure is different, but I do believe that the GM is more important because he acquires the star talent that you need to succeed in this league. And then the head coach is the guy who's just who's required to put that talent in the best possible position to succeed. So they're both very important, but getting the talent, in my opinion, is the hard part. Getting them to play at their best is probably right behind that.
So right now, I did a little bit of, I looked at the free agent list, and my top 3 needs for this team right now are probably wide receiver, like you said, corner, and then you can always use offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a scenario where Poles during the draft tries to make a move back into that first round? They got a 2nd and a 3rd and 2 5ths and a 6th.
It's possible, but I would say it's unlikely because of the limited resources he already has to work with. There's only 6 picks next year because of the trade for Justin Fields. There's only 5 this year. If anything, I think because you're at a higher position in the 2nd round, he might try to move back and collect a couple of extra picks if he can. And, you got to remember, he's also working with scouts and a front office that he's unfamiliar with, and he won't be able to really bring in his own guys until, later this spring. So that's usually how it works when you're building your own front office. So I don't think he's going to be overly aggressive as of right now. He's not really in a position to do so. I think
Right.
he'll either stay put, just make a pick, try to get the best player you can, or he'll move back a few spaces, pick up an extra pick or two, and then, see if he can fill some needs or just get the best possible players you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Turtle, you got any question?
We heard Eric. We heard. I think it was. I forget who it was. It was on ESPN Radio. They were saying that we haven't heard Brian Dable's name gain any momentum, and they said it was because from day one, the word out of his camp was that he isn't overly impressed with Justin Fields from his time at Ohio State and his rookie season. Do you think that's a reason we haven't really heard his name mentioned too much with this Bears job? Is because he just might not be a good fit for what we have here?
I haven't heard anything in regards to his opinion on Fields. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying I haven't heard anything like that. The thing I've heard about him is his interviews have come off kind of bland, kind of meh. He doesn't really express his vision for the team very well. Now, this isn't an uncommon thing with head coach candidates. Some of them just can't articulate as well as others. It doesn't mean they're a bad coach. It's just this is why the interviews are so pivotal to getting those head coaching jobs. Matt Nagy was able to sell his vision really well to the Bears. That's why he ended up getting the Bears job. You really got to be a salesman, and a lot of guys just aren't good at something like that. So it's really the critical final step, and it's why you probably need some training if you're a coaching candidate to be able to understand, how to sell that vision, be able to articulate what you want, every step, every detail, and once you're there, in addition to your track record, which Dable obviously has a great one, then you're probably going to end up getting hired. But as of right now, he's done great work with Josh Allen, and that's sort of what's sustaining him. But it seems like a lot of teams are kind of not going all the way in on him because of his interviews. While they haven't been terrible, they just haven't been, knock you out of the park sort of situation.
Right. And I know I only got you for a couple more minutes, Eric. I would like to know what you've heard about people's opinion on Justin Fields.
There have been one or two guys, both in the head coaching candidates that they've interviewed and GM candidates they've interviewed, who haven't been really Fields guys. But a lot of them have also been, they really like Fields. They love his talent. They love his mentality, the work ethic, all that sort of stuff. They feel he can be a great quarterback. And Poles was one of them. He's a big supporter of Justin Fields, which isn't a big surprise because in terms of skill set, he's a lot like Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
In terms of, mindset, toughness. He has all those traits. It's just a question of putting him in the best possible situation to succeed, which Kansas City has done for Patrick. Now the Bears need to do it for Justin. And I think that's what Poles understands. Get him an offensive line, get him better weapons, get him better coaching, and he should be able to flourish. So, it's not surprising that Poles ended up being their choice because he understood that and sold his vision to the McCaskies.
Absolutely. Well, I told you we'd make it kind of fast and easy, quick, get a couple quick hits from you, and I appreciate you jumping on.
Of course.
You want to let everybody know where they can find you, Eric?
You can find me right there at Erik Lambert1 on Twitter. I write for sportsmockery.com all the time. I publish every day. I try to engage with fans all the time. So feel free to talk to me whenever you want to ask me about some Bears questions.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Make sure you go and follow him and everybody over at Sports Mockery. Great stuff,
Yeah,
Eric.
definitely a great follow and great work that comes out of there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Eric Lambert, fast and easy. I told him it would be. I didn't want to take up too much of his time.
Right.
A lot of good stuff today for the Bears. But like we talked with Braggs, there's really only so much you can talk about until the next domino
until the next domino falls, right?
Right, and that's going to be the head coach, and then
it doesn't
really
have to be the head coach here, right? Like you can,
right.
Somebody just had, like Eric said, nobody's been hired yet. Somebody's got to get hired somewhere, and then you'll see things start to move. So,
I did have, if you want to, we could dabble with a little bit of thoughts on Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show. I have a quick little video. Just listen to this, and I want to gauge your thoughts on it afterwards.
But everything is definitely on the table. There are things that seem more plausible or more likely, which I won't necessarily get into. But the most important thing is first the commitment to playing and to going through the off season and training and all that stuff is the first, and then after that It's just conversations with my agent and Brian, and looking at the desires of the team and the the kind of the mindset moving forward, and then make a decision from there. There also is a time frame for this because I understand that my decision does impact a number of other people's decisions, and I want to be very sensitive to that. And so I will definitely make a decision sooner rather than later.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Because everybody's saying free agency. AJ came on yesterday and said he would assume that you would make the decision before free agency. There were some reports on the NFL Network by Insider of Sports, Rappaport, saying before free agency. Free agency is what, March 16th?
Yes.
I mean, that's a pretty long time. I mean, we are in day-to-day business. Are you expecting to have this decision done sooner than later in your eyes of what you said? And what does that mean, you think?
I think even sooner than that. I mean, I'd like to, again, be respectful of the organization. I think the most, one decision that will be upcoming will be obviously Devontae and his future with the team. There still is this thing called the franchise tag, which I, don't think 17 wants the franchise. Like, no player ever wants a franchise.
Ever!
But that decision on that, I believe, is in February.
So, obviously,
I'm so tired of hearing that dude talk.
I was just gonna say the same thing, but real quick, I want to give him props for pushing for his dude Devontae. Nobody wants that franchise tag.
You should have said that shit right from the get-go instead of from the organization. And
right.
I just say what it is. Devontae Adams wants to know what you're going to do, so he knows what he's doing because he's going wherever you go.
Right, absolutely. And
I got a couple first, initial reactions to what I just saw. First off, boy, is AJ Hawk a weird-looking dude.
He's always been that way, though.
Yeah, but man, now he's got short hair and everything. He's just a weird-looking dude. Like, as soon as that came up, I was like, is that AJ Hawk?
Yeah.
And then, secondly, Pat McAfee is such a weird guy. Like,
he just goes.
His mannerisms, his everything. Like, he's even that way. Like on, he does a play-by-play for SmackDown.
Yeah.
And he's like 1,000 miles an hour all the time. Like, he reminds me of. Did you ever see Dodgeball?
Yeah.
He always reminds me of who's that, Cotton or whatever the other guy is. When he's sitting there and he's always sitting like up on the desk and with his squatting in the chair and everything, like that's who he is. That's Pat McAfee.
Yeah, he's always like up and down and this way and that way. Especially if you watch him on SmackDown, dude's like jumping on the announce table.
Right,
and all kinds.
Like he's just a weird dude. Like, I don't know if he's coked out or if he's just a weird dude or what, but golly.
But I know this is a Bears or Chicago sports-based thing, but in reality, news with Aaron Rodgers is, something Chicago sports related, because it sounds to me like he is really not sold on sticking around in Green Bay, because I feel like if he was, it would be as simple as, I want to give it one more run. You know what I mean? And I think it has like a lot to do with Devontae Adams. If the Packers decided, hey, well, we'll pay him, but
yeah, I mean, don't you kind of get the impression hearing Aaron talk that it really, and I guess you can't come out and say it, but I would appreciate it more if he did just come out and say, look, I'm going to sit back and see who makes what moves, and if I think there's a team that gives me a better shot at the playoffs or the Super Bowl, that's where I'm going to go.
Well, right. I mean, look what Tom Brady did, right? And that's a whole different topic for another show. But the dude left New England and everybody was like, oh, is he still going to have success? Went to Tampa Bay. He built that team around him and they won a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
It's that simple. Like, you go to a team with cap space, you go to a team with draft capital, bring a guy that and Devontae Adams with you. And I know Packer fans don't want to hear it, but I don't really care. You leave, you go somewhere like, I think I posted something on Twitter a couple weeks right after the Packers lost. The Colts have a lot of cap space.
The Colts do have a lot of cap space.
Tennessee has a lot of cap space. They got a running game that you can get behind.
Yeah, see,
both those teams do.
Like I think the Colts is the no-brainer because you're in a dome. You don't have to play outside in the cold and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously Denver, because of Denver's got a lot of good things going for them, and depending who gets that head coaching job. But definitely don't rule out the Colts. I mean, they got a really good defense. They got a great running game. They have a really, really, really good offensive line. And, now you put Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams out there with, whether it's T.Y. Hilton or Zach Pascal, Michael Pittman Jr., those guys they have there, Jack Doyle at the tight end. They've got weapons.
Right.
You just make a lot of things. I wish, and I know it gets messy, but I just wish he would just come out and say, like, look, I don't know that I'm going to be back. I'm going to look and see what gives me the best chance to win, and that's what I'm going to do. Because look, if anything, that point in your career, you're 37 years old, 30 years old, you have that right. Like, that's your right. Now what throws a wrench in that is if the Green Bay Packers just decide to franchise Devontae Adams anyways. Now you're not sending him anywhere unless you trade for him.
Right. But they would have to trade for Aaron also, wouldn't they?
Correct. They would have to trade
right.
Aaron, so it would be you have to trade for both of them, which obviously then you have to give up more than if you're just trading for Aaron Rodgers, especially Devontae Adams, who isn't old. He's not 38 years old. He's young and in the prime of his career, and really arguably the best receiver in football right now.
I mean, the Bears got $43 million in cap space. I'd be totally cool if they were like, hey, Devontae.
I think that number is probably going to be closer to 60 by the time a lot of these guys are no longer here, right?
Right. Like, Bears will cut some guys, and
but the other like Green Bay's 40. They're almost 48 million over the cap.
Yeah, I tried to talk to a buddy of mine, and I was like, oh no, they'll be back. They'll be back. Like, how can you be so sure? Because there is so much. He made it specifically a point to say in the end of the year press conference that he will not be a part of a rebuild.
Right.
And you're going to have to get rid of so many pieces.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Zadarius Smith is already on Twitter thanking the Green Bay fans for his time in Green Bay. I mean, you've got guys that the odds are both Smith pass rushers are gone. David Bakhtiari is probably gone. So when you start looking at guys like that, especially Bakhtiari, who Aaron spoke so highly of, and then to lose your top pass rushers as well on a defense that really wasn't that good in the first place.
Right.
When you start to lose all those guys, at what point does that make Aaron Rodgers say, oh, this is what I want to be a part of? And even if he does want to be a part of it, so now you're 40, let's say they make those moves. They get to, 30 million under the cap or over the cap. You still have to negotiate with Devontae Adams.
Right.
So, I mean, even if you franchise it, you're talking about 20-some million for the year. So now you're at like 60 million over the cap. So I just don't see how it gets done, right?
It's so nice to see the Packers in a state of uncertainty. And I know that sounds ridiculously rude, but like, we've been in this flux, and call me petty, call me whatever you want. But the Bears, it'll be nice, hopefully, for the Bears to be able to turn it around, which they've never shown the ability to, and to have an opportunity to be competitive in the NFC North if Aaron Rodgers was to leave. Because realistically, if Rodgers leaves Green Bay, that opens the North up fully for any of these teams.
Well, I was talking at work today. Somebody is a huge Packer fan there. We were talking like, Aaron Rodgers 11-10 in the playoffs.
Right.
Everyone tries to say Aaron Rodgers is better than Tom Brady, or he's right there with Tom Brady. Tom Brady's got 35 wins in the playoffs. Like Tom Brady has more wins than franchises. Man. But forget the Super Bowls. I'm just talking about just as easy as wins. The Super Bowls aren't even close. I mean, so you've got a guy that has as many NFC titles as Rex Grossman. Let that sink in.
As many Super Bowl appearances as Rex Grossman.
Right. Like, I don't get it. I mean, can you imagine? I saw a thing today. It said on Facebook, it said, could you imagine having arguably the best quarterback in football, or one of the top quarterbacks in football, for 30 straight years between Favre and Rodgers, and coming away with 2 Super Bowls?
Yeah, and like that's my argument whenever I get into these debates I live in Wisconsin, so like there's Packer fans, I trip over them when I leave the house. I
hit them with my car when I come there.
But like that's the thing is like, the quarterback position for the Bears has been terrible, right? But at least we've had opportunities to get to a Super Bowl. We went to a Super Bowl with quarterbacks that we had no thought of them ever leading us there.
Right.
You've had Brett Favre, and from Brett Favre went to the second best quarterback probably in the NFL, in NFL history, maybe just by the
And
way
at some and at some points was playing like the best quarterback in football.
right? And you came away with 2. That's only one more than the Bears since '85. Like,
Right.
You really don't have that much to you win a lot of regular season games.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Great.
That's
regular
fantastic.
Season, great regular season organization, but that's it.
Yeah. I mean, Tom Brady won a lot of regular season games, but he also won a lot of playoff games and championships. So, I mean, I just thought it'd be interesting to get your take on that. But we definitely ran a little longer today with the double guests, but I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
We had a couple comments in the chat, which was awesome. I just had no time to really pop them up with the guests, but I appreciate everybody who tuned in. We're going to get out of here. We'll be back next week for Turtles Take on Tuesday. We kind of did a little combo because we didn't have it last week.
And it hasn't been put out yet, but I just got confirmation right before we went on the show that we will have Steve Edwards joining us next Tuesday for Turtles Take. He will be on, and we'll talk Bears and the new GM and
probably a new head coach.
Probably a new head coach by next Tuesday. So a lot to talk about with him.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Turtle, it was great having you as my co-host as usual.
Appreciate you having me on.
And we will talk to you guys next week.
And thank you.